The Batman Part 2 is one of, if not the most, highly anticipated film that we are getting in the near future for the DC universe. The first installation of Matt Reeves' Batman universe was very successful, and then they did follow that up with a Penguin series that was also considered to be very successful. So it definitely makes sense that the sequel to the movie is going to be a topic of conversation. So anytime we get any type of news regarding this movie, whether that is story details, casting details, or even just set photos, we are obviously going to go in a frenzy and go crazy over it with theories, hypotheses, everything like that, just trying to figure out everything we possibly can regarding this next upcoming film. And today is no different because Deadline came out with an article that they are reportedly officially casting Scarlett Johansson in the Batman Part 2. Now, it is not disclosed what role this is specifically going to be for. However, they are confirmed to be in the final stages of their negotiations, so it is looking like Scarlett Johansson will be joining the cast for the Batman Part 2. But that leaves us with a question, and that question is, who is she going to be playing? And honestly, I think there are about 5 to 6 answers that we could give as to who she is playing in this film. Realistically, I think the top 3 will be the most likely, and that brings me to the subject of the video, because today we're talking the Batman Part 2. New castings confirmed. But before we get into anything, guys, please, for me, like this video, subscribe to the page, and hit that noti bell. Alright, as I mentioned, Scarlett Johansson is officially joining the DC universe. She is going to be in Matt Reeves' The Batman Part 2, but who is she going to play? Which iconic female villain is she going to be playing in this movie? That is what we are going to get into today. I'm going to break down everyone who I think she could be playing, from least likely at 5 all the way up to number 1, the most likely choice, the choice that would make the most sense. But first and foremost, we do have to look at everything that Deadline did say, because they somewhat teased something that I think gives us a really big hint as to who this character is going to eventually be revealed to be. And that hint was, Deadline was reporting that she is apparently going to be playing a romantic love interest that is secretly a villain. So, she's going to be someone who is posing as a love interest for Bruce Wayne, and at the same time also be some sort of villain going up against the Batman. Now, in some iterations, this is how they portray Catwoman, and they have her having a romance with Bruce Wayne, while she is also going toe-to-toe with Batman. Then in other iterations, they're just romantically involved from both sides. However, we do know, obviously, she will not be Catwoman, as Catwoman is already cast. Sophia Falcone also is not going to be up for debate because she is already cast in this universe. So who does that leave us with? Well, actually, we have a bunch. And when I say a bunch, I definitely mean a bunch, because to me, Batman has, without a doubt, the best selection of female villains in his rogues. He definitely has the widest variety and definitely the best selection, because he's got a lot of great choices in there to choose from. With that being said, I am going to put an honorable mention in here at number 6. For me, I'm going to put Talia al Ghul as number 6. Now, I know, putting Talia al Ghul at such a low number as having her as just an honorable mention at number 6 might not make a whole lot of sense. However, I don't feel like doing the League of Shadows, especially this early on, for this version of Batman would fit, and it wouldn't fit with what Matt Reeves has said his vision is going to be. The different ways Batman is going to be tested. I just feel like putting Talia in this would mean Ra's al Ghul, the League of Assassins, or League of Shadows, and I just personally don't think it would fit that well. Would it work? Yes, absolutely. However, I just don't see them going down this path. So to me, she is very unlikely. But with that being said, my official number 5 entry as to who I think Scarlett Johansson is going to be playing in the Batman Part 2 is none other than Roxy Rocket. Yes, Roxy Rocket, if none of you are aware, she is someone who has not appeared very much in any type of superhero media outside of the comics. However, she did make 2 appearances in the DCAU, once in the New Adventures of Batman and then once in a crossover episode of Superman the Animated Series. She is essentially an extreme stunt woman that literally takes her scenes to the extreme. She started doing all the stunt scenes for the men who were too afraid to do them, but time and time again, she kept on upping the stakes and making things more complicated and more dangerous than they needed to be, to the point where no studio would insure her or hire her for that matter. So she went out and she decided to become a thrill seeker, and the best way to do that was by, of course, you guessed it, committing crimes in Gotham, because who doesn't love a good thrill of getting chased by a man in a bat costume? But that being said, I do think this would work pretty well in this universe. She isn't too fantastical. The only element of her would be the rocket that she does tend to ride around on, but I do think they could make this work in this universe and just either do some other type of technology to explain how she can have this and how it's operational. That could also lead to Batman having to up his tech to combat her, because as we know, his Batmobile isn't even that advanced, and even his wingsuit is something he had to externally put on in the first movie. It's not something where his cape just actually acts as that glider. So this could help to see a little bit more development for Batman through this way as well. That being said, I do not think she is the most likely option. I do believe it would make sense. It would fit. Scarlett Johansson would be perfect for the role. However, I do see a couple other characters just making a little bit more sense. And with that, that does bring me to the fourth entry on this list. And the fourth entry would be Poison Ivy. Now, I know, Poison Ivy, fantastical, controlling vines wouldn't work. However, if they do go down the route that Batman the Animated Series went down before they transitioned to the new adventures of Batman, I do think it would fit really, really well. She was essentially just a chemist that did a couple bad experiments, they went wrong, and her body became immune to certain toxins and certain poisons, and she just created different toxins to affect people, mainly men, and using pheromones as well. This could be a really, really interesting thing, and we could see Batman taken advantage of, especially if she does pose as a love interest at first, and then she does become someone who is able to manipulate him through his heart and through his mind. This could pose a really serious threat, and obviously Poison Ivy, even if you don't give her the plant manipulation, she can still be a pretty big threat, especially, again, if they do have Scarlett Johansson, they can maybe incorporate some hand-to-hand combat for Poison Ivy. Maybe this version of Poison Ivy is a little bit more technical versus being able to rely on controlling plants, again, as she does in different types of mediums like animation or the movies or even in the comics. With that being said, that does then bring me to the number 3 selection, and at number 3 I have kind of a wild one. That would be Copperhead. Now, again, I know, Copperhead doesn't make a whole lot of sense. Don't know why she'd be above the other two. Seems fantastical. But realistically, she doesn't. The one that I'm somewhat talking about is the one that appears in the Arkham Origins game, where she is somewhat bioengineered, and she just has prosthetics of a Copperhead. She has the teeth, she might even have a little bit of claws on her, but she's not full-fledged Copperhead like we see in Justice League the Animated Series or even the Suicide Squad animated movie Hell to Pay. It is going to be a different iteration of Copperhead. However, I do feel like with the prosthetics, it would be a little bit more difficult to have her be the main love interest for Bruce Wayne. So again, unless it's something that she's able to remove and then put back in when she does become Copperhead, I feel like this one would be pretty difficult. However, with the world that Matt Reeves has set up, I feel like this could be a really, really interesting thing, especially if you have Copperhead maybe being a hired gun for Penguin. That's why I feel like this one is a little bit more likely than the other two options, just because I feel like she would fit with the overall world that has been constructed. Again, she could just come in, be a hired gun for Penguin, maybe end up turning on him. Obviously, we do know amongst criminals, a lot of the times when they do make deals, they end up not working out so well, especially for said criminal that is hired. So this would offer a really interesting story to see unfold, and especially if you add that element of her maybe being a love interest for Bruce Wayne, that could just add so many more layers to this story. And the combat would be really, really cool, because Copperhead is someone who can physically threaten the Batman. But speaking of physically threatening the Batman, that brings me to my number 2 selection, and that is Andrea Beaumont, the Phantasm. Now, yes, I know she would be a physical threat for Batman, being able to go toe-to-toe with him. However, even more than that, she is someone that has been able to break through the armor of the Batman. She's been able to reach the heart of Bruce Wayne. We saw it in the Mask of the Phantasm movie, which to me is the greatest superhero film we've ever seen, that Batman almost didn't become Batman. Bruce Wayne was set to give up becoming Batman, and it was all because of her, all because he met her, and all because she meant so much to him that he was finally happy. And we even got that moment of him talking to his parents' grave, saying that he didn't expect himself to be happy. He didn't see this coming. He just needs a sign. Please show him a sign. And she is right there. In the rain, they have that amazing moment, great chemistry, and then as that story unfolds, we do see that although this is Bruce's greatest love, she ends up being a very, very formidable adversary. And even after Batman finds out that the Phantasm, who's done all these terrible things, who's killed multiple people, even though they're bad people, she is still just straight up murdering them. And after this is found out, Batman still tries to plead with her. Batman still tries to reach out and still tries to reason with her. And we're able to see the heart of Batman shine throughout this movie. And I feel like if they brought that out in the Batman Part 2, it really would set up this trilogy to be, without a doubt, the best Batman trilogy we've ever gotten. Again, I love the Nolan films. I think they were great. However, this to me would just give us so much more heart for the character of Batman, and it would give us one of my personal favorite Batman villains. I absolutely love the Phantasm. So if they do some type of iteration of Andrea Beaumont and her being the Phantasm while also being a love interest for Bruce Wayne, that would be absolutely spectacular to see on screen. The combat, again, would be great. You would still get a murder mystery with the Phantasm, so it would still fit in their detective universe that they have set up. And not only that, it would also give us maybe a little bit more backstory into Bruce Wayne. Maybe she wouldn't be a love interest in today's day and age, but maybe she would be before the events of the first film. Maybe that's why Bruce Wayne is a little bit even more so closed off than we're used to. And maybe that's why he hasn't come out of his shell, because the last time he did, he was going to give up being Batman for another person. And look what happened. She ended up leaving him. Now, again, he doesn't find out the details as to why she left until much later, but still, it would make it understandable for him to be a recluse after this happened. So, all in all, I do feel like this one is pretty likely to happen. And to me, if this one happened, this would be my preference. This would be my first choice. And this, to me, would make it for one of the best Batman films we've ever gotten, just right off the bat. However, unfortunately, that is not the most likely scenario in my opinion. I do think there is a much clearer answer for the first most likely pick for her to be in this movie, and honestly that comes into a couple of things, one of which being something Matt Reeves has said, but also something Robert Pattinson said regarding villains they would like to see in this trilogy throughout the years. And that brings me to coming in at number 1, the most likely character that Scarlett Johansson is going to be playing in the Batman Part 2 is Samantha Vanaver. Now, if any of you do not know who that is okay, as she is someone who has been around more in recent years, and she more so took over in the New 52 era, and she actually did appear in one of the New 52 movies, that movie being Batman vs. Robin. If any of you know that movie, you will know that this movie is centered around the Court of Owls, and again, if you've listened to interviews from Matt Reeves or Robert Pattinson, a group of characters that they have both mentioned multiple times is the Court of Owls. The Court of Owls would be set up in this universe so absolutely perfectly. I actually mentioned them in a video before that I think in a trilogy they would probably be the main villains for a third film that would be set up. However, with the news of Scarlett Johansson being all but confirmed to be casted in this movie, and the fact that she will be playing a love interest that will also be a villain, it just absolutely screams to me Samantha Vanaver. It just makes way too much sense. She absolutely fits the look, she fits the character description, and I think she could have a really interesting dynamic with Bruce, especially in this universe. Bruce is in a mentality that he wants to be a recluse and help the city as Batman. We saw that he was starting to grow as Batman. However, I feel like this second film, and Matt Reeves has teased a little bit of this, that it is going to focus a little bit more on Bruce Wayne and Bruce Wayne's character growing. And a great way to do that would be through the medium of Samantha. Maybe they meet, maybe they want to try to make the city a better place together. Maybe they want to try to use their wealth in a positive way. But behind the scenes, we do know that Samantha is secretly the Grandmaster of the Court of Owls. So this could lead to her going down the path similar to what they did in the animated movie, where she wants to bring Bruce Wayne in, all while Batman this whole time has been investigating the Court of Owls, trying to take them down, trying to figure out everything he can about them, only to be brought before all of them by Samantha, the person that he's romantically involved with. So this would act as a big thing of betrayal between the two of them. So we would see Batman have to go through struggles, not only personal. I just feel like there would be such an opportunity here if you do have Samantha bring Bruce Wayne in, bring him before the entire court, and then you have that realization from Bruce that it is Samantha and that this person has either been one, manipulating him to get at his money, to get at his resources, his power, his influence, just for this organization, or maybe she does actually have feelings for him, and that could lead to an even deeper thing, because especially if she does believe what she is doing is right, then we could see a dynamic unfold where it is similar to the Andrea Beaumont situation, where she believes what she's doing is right, but she does still have love for Bruce, so there could be even more heartache associated with that, and seeing her go toe-to-toe with Batman could be really cool, especially if you do something with Talon, or maybe instead of her being the Grand Master, maybe in this universe, she is Talon, and she could be the Talon that the Court of Owls sends out when they do need someone taken care of. Again, there are so many different possibilities, but with that being said, that is the most likely person that I do believe this is going to be. Now again, I don't know if she is going to be that Grand Master figure, or if she is going to end up being a female version of Talon. Either way, I think that would be really cool. I think personally, I would slightly prefer her being a female version of Talon, just because I feel like the Grand Master doesn't typically go toe-to-toe with Batman, especially from a physical standpoint, whereas seeing her go toe-to-toe with Batman as Talon would be really, really cool. It would actually remind me a lot of Lady Shiva. So with that being said, if she is a character that is similar to Lady Shiva, like Talon, that would be awesome. But let me know what all of you think. Who do you think Scarlett Johansson is going to play in the Batman Part 2? Do you agree with my selections? And do you agree with how they're ranked? Let me know in the comments below. And while you guys are down there, please, for me, like this video, subscribe to the page, and hit that noti bell. And I'll see all of you in the next video. Goodbye.